Chapter 5. Rain drizzled softly against the glass as Paris turned gray and golden beneath the late afternoon sky. Inside the suite, a quiet stillness wrapped around Alexander and Amelia like a cocoon. The events of the morning still pulsed in the air: Richard's surprise appearance, the confrontation, the kiss that followed, and the quiet confession. "I think I'm falling for you," she had whispered. The morning sun had answered without the sheer white curtains of her suite in Paris. "I'll catch you every time." Sat by the window, wrapped in a silk robe, the world outside refused to remain silent. Paparazzi already stationed at the hotel entrance, waiting. Alexander opened the door to find Alara, but her mind was elsewhere, looking tense. "Last night still echoed in her body," she said in a hushed voice. Every touch, every kiss Alexander placed on her skin had left her breathless. Amelia joined them in the living room. For the first time in her life, soft from she had felt love without judgment, but her eyes alert, without shame. "What is it?" His hunger wasn't just for Alara her beauty, handed her a tablet, for her essence, her fire. "Your ex-husband's PR team is spinning this into something dangerous." A knock on the door pulled her back. "They're saying you invited him." She opened it to find Alexander. "That you're using Alexander for attention, even in claiming just a black this whole thing is a media stunt." His smile warmed her more than the coffee. Alexander stepped in immediately, he said, leaning in to kiss her lips, for defamation. Soft and slow, savoring the moment. Alara shook her head. "You stayed in your suite?" "That's not the worst part," she asked, surprised. "One of the gossip outlets found." He smirked, pulling her gently by the waist. She swiped his fingers resting on her hip bone. Amelia's entire body froze. "I thought you needed space there after. There it was, everything. A photo from years ago. I didn't want you to wake up and feel crowded. Cam still. But if it were Amelia, up to me," in a hospital gown, voice husky, her eyes vacant, "I'd have spent every second with you." Beside her stood Richard, Amelia visibly furious, cheeks pink, heart fluttering. She looked frail, her wrist stepped bruised. Inside and held up a garment bag. Her past, the night she was dragged into a psychiatric ward for a panic attack. "But I thought you could wear Richard had screamed at her for embarrassing him at a charity dinner. For my girl. He told doctors she was unstable, shy but smiling. She had stayed there for 2 days. Alexander stayed on set. It was her deepest secret. Every time Amelia turned her head, now she found him watching her. Her knees not buckled. Possessively, but proudly. Alexander caught her. Like a man who couldn't believe the woman he admired, he demanded to him. Alara answered carefully as she changed. He someone from Richard's dressing room door, spun her in his arms, trying to paint you as mentally unstable. His hands tangled in her curls, so you have no choice but to come crawling back and jaw. Tears stung Amelia's eyes, things could go but not from fear. A knock interrupted them. From fury, her manager entered with a pale face, shaky but proud. "You need to see this." "No." He held up. "Let him control my story again." On it was a gossip blog. "Not now." Alexander looked at her with awe. Spotted at her hotel that night. Wants her back? She made a decision. She froze. She would tell the world the truth. "What the hell is this?" In an impromptu press interview outside the hotel, "It's Richard." Amelia stepped forward, "He's facing here," the cameras. The manager said nervously. "No glam. Apparently, no he's stylist. Been telling reporters that your success was built in a white blouse and jeans, and that he made a mistake leaving in hers." Amelia's I was in a toxic marriage. The audacity. I was emotionally manipulated. The man who once refused to touch her, told her she was dirty. I had a breakdown now claimed and her like she was some prize he deserved. I was ashamed for years. Alexander clenched his jaw. But I'm not anymore. Where is he? I survived. Lobby. I built myself up from before nothing. Anyone could stop him, and Alexander I will not be silenced by a man who once called Amelia me broken. Followed close behind, because I'm not broken. When they reached the lobby, Richard stood in an expensive suit, and I'm stronger than I have ever been. Plastic smile. She turned toward Alexander and smiled. Alexander didn't say a word. "And I'm with someone who doesn't fix me." He walked straight up and punched him across the jaw. Gasps echoed. Cameras the crowd erupted with emotion. "Next time you talk about her like that, I'll break your face." Women watching Alexander from balconies clapped. Amelia stepped forward, trended within the hour. Tall before her past. Hashtag Amelia Night Survivor spread like wildfire. Back upstairs, Alexander pulled her into his arms. "I've never been prouder," he whispered against her hair. "You were brilliant." She smiled through tears. "I thought I'd feel afraid. But I feel free." They kissed, slow, tender, powerful. Their lips moved with reverence. The moment shifted again into passion. Clothes fell, barriers melted. He worshipped her scars, kissed every inch of her skin, made her feel like fire and silk, like thunder and softness all in one. They didn't rush. They savored. Afterwards, lying beside him, Amelia whispered, "Do you believe in soulmates?" Alexander looked at her, eyes soft. "I never did. Until I met you." She smiled, and nestled closer, heart finally starting to heal. To be continued. Chapter 6. The air in the suite was filled with the scent of fresh roses and soft candlelight. Parisian twilight slipped through the sheer curtains, casting golden shadows on the bed where Amelia lay curled beside Alexander, her fingers tracing circles lazily across his bare chest. Her lips were swollen from kisses. Her eyes, though tired, were glowing. "I can't believe I just told the world everything," she whispered, almost disbelieving. "For years, I couldn't even say it out loud." Alexander tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and kissed her forehead gently. "You didn't just speak, Amelia. You roared." She smiled, then leaned up, her lips brushing his. "And you stood beside me." "Always," he murmured. Their mouths met again, slower this time, not urgent, not hungry, but gentle and knowing, like two people who had already made love with their souls and now their bodies were simply catching up. But their quiet cocoon was destined to break. Later that night, while Amelia showered, Alexander sat on the terrace, scrolling through headlines. Amelia Knight's rise from abuse survivor to global icon. Alexander Wolf defends lover against media attacks, new power couple? But then, one that made his jaw tighten. Richard Knight sues Alexander Wolf for slander, legal war begins. Alexander didn't tell Amelia right away. He didn't want to burden her. Not yet. Instead, he focused on her, on making every moment beautiful, joyful, and untouched by the chaos outside. They traveled together, Venice, Santorini, Madrid, hidden under hats and sunglasses, wrapped in stolen kisses on empty beaches, midnight swims in private pools, and laughter shared over candlelit dinners. Alexander would sneak into her rehearsals and watch her dance like no one was watching, while she wrote songs in bed wrapped in his shirt, singing lyrics that mirrored their growing love. One night, in a moonlit villa in Tuscany, after a dinner that turned into wine and kisses on the floor, Alexander paused, his hand still on the soft skin of her thigh. Chapter 1. The clock struck midnight, and with it, a strange silence settled over the sprawling penthouse that floated high above the city of London. It was a luxurious space, glass walls, velvet curtains, marble floors, and the quiet hum of success vibrating in the air. But inside, she stood alone, barefoot, her slender frame wrapped in an oversized ivory silk robe. Her long dark hair was loose, cascading down her shoulders in soft waves. Evelyn Grace Whitmore. A name the world now knew. A name that once meant nothing. She stared out of the glass window, the lights of the city blinking like restless stars. Somewhere below, people danced, laughed, kissed, celebrated. But not her. Tonight should have been a celebration for her too. It was July 26th, her wedding anniversary. She lifted her phone. The screen blinked awake, 12:01 a.m. She closed her eyes. Her body still remembered that date like a wound that refused to heal. 3 years ago, she had stood under the golden arch of roses, wearing a gown worth millions, next to a man who had promised to love her. To protect her. To cherish her. Edward Hughes. Cold, aristocratic, old money perfect. A man with classic suits and a colder soul. But in the 2 years of their marriage, not once had he touched her. On their wedding night, she had reached out to him, shy but open, heart racing as she whispered his name. He turned away. "I can't, Evelyn," he had said, jaw tight. "I thought I could, but knowing that you've been with someone before. I can't bring myself to pretend." She remembered how the silence that followed had been louder than any scream. "You're not clean," he added, not meeting her eyes. "I thought you'd be different. But your past, it's too much." His words pierced deeper than knives. She had stood there, in their grand honeymoon suite in Vienna, feeling dirtier than she ever had in her life. The lace on her bridal lingerie had suddenly felt like chains. That night, she cried into a pillow, alone. And that loneliness stretched for 2 years. She walked slowly to the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of red wine, her fingers trembling slightly. The cool marble counter beneath her palm grounded her, barely. The television in the background played quietly. Her own face flashed across the screen. Global icon Evelyn Whitmore, from actress to international legend. The actress-turned-philanthropist is expected at the Venice Film Awards next month. She let out a dry laugh. The world saw a goddess. A phoenix. But tonight, she felt like a shadow with diamonds on. She hadn't spoken to Edward in years. But tonight, she had checked. He was in the news too. Paparazzi had spotted him earlier that day at Heathrow Airport, holding hands with his ex-girlfriend Clarissa, the very woman he used to tell Evelyn was just a friend. Clarissa had always looked at Evelyn like she was less pure, less refined, less worthy. Tonight, they were smiling together. Edward even had his arm around her waist. Something he never once did with Evelyn. Of course, she whispered to herself, voice cold. Of course you'd celebrate our anniversary with the one you really loved. She walked to the mirror, wine in hand, staring at her reflection. Her skin was glowing. Her lips full, painted red. She was everything magazines called timeless beauty. And yet, there was pain in her eyes. A quiet ache she had trained the world not to see. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. A message. Edward. Evelyn. Happy anniversary. Strange day, isn't it? Her heart stopped for a second. Now? Now he wanted to remember? Now he had the courage to say something? She didn't reply. She placed the phone down on the marble table and walked back to the balcony, letting the cold wind hit her face. You couldn't touch me when I loved you, she whispered into the night, and now that I've become someone untouchable, you suddenly remember I exist? The stars above blinked in silent agreement. Somewhere deep inside her chest, something cracked open, not like a break, but like a transformation. She wasn't going to be Evelyn Hughes anymore. Not the woman who begged to be touched. Not the woman who cried on anniversaries. She was Evelyn Grace Whitmore now. A name that meant power. A name that would soon be whispered with desire, envy, and fear. And as the city below carried on unaware, she made a silent promise to herself. The next time a man touched her, it would be with fire, not shame. With hunger, not hesitation. And she would never again let herself be held by someone who didn't think she was worth burning for. Chapter 2. The morning after that silent anniversary, Evelyn woke up in a strange state of stillness. Not numb. Not broken. Just, reborn. She didn't cry. She didn't scroll through old photos. She didn't wonder why Edward messaged her. Instead, she pulled her hair into a loose bun, slipped into a pair of vintage sunglasses, grabbed a black coat, and walked out of the penthouse with no destination, just the need to breathe without remembering. The streets of London were cold and grey, perfect for disappearing in plain sight. But even in the most crowded corners of the city, people noticed her. Some whispered. Some stared. Some pointed. Because Evelyn Whitmore didn't look like everyone else. She walked like a woman who had died once, and come back brighter. That afternoon, she stepped into the Belvedere Gallery, a quiet, moody art house tucked away in the back alleys of Kensington. No paparazzi. No red carpet. Just abstract paintings and the smell of aged oil and old books. She was drawn to one particular painting. It was dark. Chaotic. A swirl of blacks, reds, and fire gold. At the center was a pair of eyes, fierce, male, watching. Something about it made her chest tighten. You're drawn to pain, a voice said behind her. Deep. Velvet. Slightly raspy. She turned. And there he was. Sebastian Wolf. The world knew his name. Hollywood's most elusive star. Half British, half Italian. The kind of face sculptors used to chisel from marble. Rumored to be reckless. Seductive. Dangerous. And right now, standing a breath away from her, looking at her like she was both a storm and a story he wanted to drown in. Excuse me, she said, blinking. The painting, he gestured, it's called Ruination. You're drawn to it because it feels like home. She arched an eyebrow. And you read strangers that easily? He smiled slowly. Only the ones who look like they've survived something violent. Their eyes locked. His were a deep, oceanic blue, almost unreal. But there was something unspoken between them. Something old, as if they'd met in a past life, maybe as enemies, maybe as lovers. She looked away, heart skipping. You're Evelyn Whitmore, he said, voice lower now. And you're Sebastian Wolf, she replied. Do we say our names like a contract now? He laughed. A quiet, dangerous sound that made her pulse speed up. I think we were supposed to meet here, he said, stepping closer, just close enough to feel the warmth from her skin. Why, she whispered. He didn't answer right away. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. Because you look like the kind of woman who's been worshipped wrongly, and I specialize in showing people the difference between being wanted and being understood. She didn't know what to say. No one ever spoke to her like that, not Edward. Not anyone. A part of her wanted to walk away. Another part of her wanted to step closer. To test if the spark she felt wasn't just in her imagination. Instead, she turned to the painting again, her voice steadier. Is that how you flirt? With pain and poetry? He tilted his head, almost amused. No, he said. That's how I fall in love. Her breath caught. But before she could say anything more, a photographer walked in, camera flashing. Sebastian quickly pulled his hoodie up. Next time, he said, leaning down so close she could feel his breath, let me take you somewhere you don't have to hide. And with that, he was gone. Evelyn walked out of the gallery 10 minutes later, her chest still tight, her lips still tingling from a kiss that never happened. That night, she received an anonymous message. You have a role waiting. Private casting. 11 p.m. Wear something black. She almost deleted it. Until a second message came through. There will be fire. Come if you're brave enough to burn. SW. Chapter 3. The city looked different at 11 p.m. London wasn't asleep, it shimmered with secrets. The rain had stopped, but the streets still glistened with reflections of golden streetlights and passing cars. Evelyn stood alone outside a discreet black iron gate in the heart of Mayfair, her heart pounding beneath her chest like a drum. She wore a black velvet dress that clung to her curves like liquid shadow, a high slit running up one thigh, and a silver chain around her neck that glimmered in the moonlight. The message had said to come if she was brave enough to burn. She didn't feel brave. But she was tired of being afraid. The gate buzzed and opened slowly. No words. No voices. Only the silent invitation into darkness. Inside was a private studio, walls draped in black silk, floor candles flickering everywhere like stars had descended to the ground. It smelled of cedarwood and something intoxicating, like rain and heat. At the center stood Sebastian Wolf. He wore black. Always black. A turtleneck that hugged his shoulders, sleeves rolled just enough to show the veins on his forearms. His hair was slightly wet, as if he too had walked through the city's storm. Their eyes met. Something shifted in the air. I didn't think you'd come, he said, voice soft, low. I didn't think I'd still be curious, she replied. He walked toward her, slow, like a predator who knew the prey wouldn't run. This isn't an audition, he said. At least, not a normal one. She swallowed. Then what is it? He stopped inches from her. Close enough to feel the warmth of his skin. Close enough that if she leaned forward an inch, their lips would touch. This is me, showing you the role I wrote for you. He lifted a remote and dimmed the lights until there was only the flicker of candle flames. On the far wall, a giant screen lit up with footage. Silent. Raw. Evelyn's own scenes from her early films. Close-ups of her crying, laughing, running. Her pain on display. her past, naked. She stood frozen, eyes wide. "You studied me?" she asked. "I saw truth in you," he whispered. "Real actresses pretend. You bleed on camera. You don't just perform. You live." His words wrapped around her like smoke. "Why me?" she whispered, heart pounding. He stepped even closer. "Because you're already playing the role," he murmured. The woman who was unloved, untouched, discarded like she was too much. Her breath hitched. "That's not a role," she whispered. "That's who I was." "Not anymore," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Now you're mine." The room was still. No kiss. No touch. Just his words, crawling into her soul like heat. And then, without warning, he pulled her gently by the wrist, led her toward the small stage in the center of the room, where a spotlight glowed. "Read this," he said, handing her a single-page script. She looked down. The scene was a confrontation. A woman betrayed. A man begging for her back. She lifted her eyes. "With you?" "No lines," he said. "Just feel." The performance began. She read the lines with fury, with heartbreak, with real, raw rage. Sebastian stood across from her, silent. Watching. Reacting not with words, but with his body, stepping toward her, flinching, trembling. And then, as her voice cracked with pain, he grabbed her face. And kissed her. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't planned. It wasn't soft. It was raw. Sudden. Desperate. His lips crashed into hers like he'd waited forever. She gasped, but didn't pull away. Her hands tangled in his hair. He lifted her onto the stage platform, deepening the kiss, groaning softly against her mouth. His hand slid around her waist, over her back, down to her hips, pulling her closer as if trying to make her a part of him. Their mouths moved in perfect rhythm, her hunger finally rising to the surface. When they finally broke apart, breathless, their foreheads touched. "That wasn't acting," she whispered. "No," he said, voice hoarse. "That was everything I've been holding back." The air between them burned. She stepped off the platform, heart racing. "Is this the part where you use me and walk away?" "Evelyn," he said, walking behind her slowly, "I don't want your body without your fire. And I don't want your fire if I have to dim it." She turned, breathing hard. "Then what do you want?" He looked her in the eyes. "I want to make you feel wanted. Not for a role. Not for a night. For everything you are." And for the first time since Edward, she felt seen. Not worshipped. Not pitted. Seen.